Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
You're listening to The Inner Voice with Dr. Foojan Zeine, only on LA Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine, and welcome to The Inner Voice Show. This show is about you, about everything that matters to you. I will be talking to experts that will talk about their expertise in the realm of human sciences, psychology, sociology, and everything that kind of relates to you and your life. And I love to hear from you about what are the subjects that you would like myself and our experts to talk about. And I will also bring the latest research that is coming up. And today I'm going to talk about anxiety because my guest, Dr. Friedmann Schaub, is going to be talking about anxiety, and I'll introduce him later. But first, I would actually like to give you the latest research that has come up in the realm of anxiety. So before that, we'll be right back after these messages.
Dr. Foojan Zeine is a psychotherapist, a marriage and family therapist, and a life coach with more than 27 years of experience. She is the author of the Awareness Integration Model, which has been researched and published in numerous international journals. Dr. Foojan has offices in Beverly Hills, Irvine, and Woodland Hills, California, and also consults online and by telephone. Make an appointment with her today by calling 818-648-2140 or go online to www.foojan.com. That's www.foojan.com.
For the majority of affected youth, anxiety disorders are chronic, even after a successful course of evidence-based treatments, reports a study published in the July 2018 issue of the Journal of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. The pediatric anxiety disorders are common in psychiatric illnesses. I've actually personally have seen a lot more anxiety disorders starting from age like 7 and 8 recently within the past 10 years. So it's really growing, and it's affecting approximately 10% of the children. In one of the largest comparative treatment studies, researchers found that 12 weeks of treatment for them, like cognitive behavioral therapy, were effective in reducing anxiety and improving functionality. In the newly released follow-up study, researchers recontacted these youths an average of 6 years later and then reassessed them annually for up to 4 additional years. Now, researchers found that 22% of youth who received 12 weeks of treatment for an anxiety disorder stayed in remission over a long term, meaning they did not meet the diagnostic criteria of any of the anxiety disorders. Now, 30% of youth who had received treatment remained chronically ill, meeting the diagnostic criteria for the anxiety during each year of the follow-up, and 48% relapsed, meaning they met diagnostic criteria for an anxiety disorder at some time. Now, Dr. Ginsberg, who did the study, said that when you see so few kids stay non-symptomatic after receiving the best treatments that they had, that was kind of discouraging for them. They said that they found no difference in outcomes by the treatment type. So children were just as likely to stay in remission after treatment with medication as they were with the treatment of CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy. Specifically, 319 youth and young adults, the mean age at first follow-up assessment was about 17 years of age, were followed from 2011 through 2015. And 65% of them were in the original treatment study. Now, the researchers conducted annual evaluations that assessed, among other factors, diagnosis, schools and social functionings, and services used. Findings indicated that each follow-up year, approximately half of the youth remained in remission. When examined across all years of the follow-up, that number dropped to 22%, while 30% continued to meet criteria for the anxiety disorders. So the researchers found several factors that predicted which anxiety and anxious youth were most likely to be in stable remission over the follow-up period. And these factors included those who showed clinical improvement after 12 weeks of treatment, males, youth without a social phobia diagnosis, youth who had better family functioning, and those who experienced fewer negative life events were the ones who actually the treatment worked for them and went along. So the researchers concluded that while it may be optimistic to expect that 12 weeks of treatment resulted in long-term remission, it is now clear that more needs to actually be done to help anxious youth, including treatment. So I'm excited to have Dr. Schaub with us because he has written a book about anxiety, actually. So we want to know more about how to treat anxiety, which it would work better than CBT for 12 weeks. We'll be right back.
Have you ever wished you could just wake up one day, reach across your nightstand, and hit the life reset button? Let's face it, the struggles and frustrations of everyday life leave millions of women and men around the globe yearning for a new way. And the new way is right here in Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want by Dr. Foojan Zeine. You can get it now at Foojan.com or Amazon.com. Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want. You deserve it.
Were you recently injured in a car accident? Then you need the law offices of Aria Thadakar for your free case evaluation. Don't let the medical bills pile up and don't let the insurance companies try to settle your claim for a few $100s. Call 714-464-3246. The law offices of Aria Thadakar serves all of California. If they don't win, you don't pay. So call now, 714-464-3246. This is a paid-for attorney advertisement by the law offices of Aria Thadakar of Orange, California.
Welcome back, everyone, to Inner Voice Show. I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine, and I am excited to have Dr. Friedmann Schaub, MD, and he has his PhD, is an award-winning author of The Fear and Anxiety Solution, a breakthrough process for healing and empowerment with your subconscious mind. Dr. Schaub is a physician specializing in cardiology and molecular biologist, has helped thousands of people with his personal breakthrough and empowerment program to overcome their fear and anxiety by addressing the deeper subconscious root causes of these emotional challenges. You can visit him at thefearandanxietysolution.com. And you can also go to his Facebook on the Fear and Anxiety Solution page. Welcome to my show.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I have to say, unfortunately, your voice goes in and out for me. So I want to hear all, your comments and research and questions, but I was able only to hear half of it. I don't know why. So all the commercials came in through clear and loud. So I'm not sure if there's anything that I can do to make you to hear you better.
Thank you. I'm sure that the people who are working at this are listening to us and they're working at it. Can you hear me well now?
It goes in and out.
It
so it just continues to go in and out.
It's still going out. Okay. I hope you can hear me. I'm having our technical group hopefully are looking and listening and working at it. So I also know that you have your own podcast. Can you a little bit talk about your own podcast before we get into your book?
Yeah, it's called Empowerment Radio, and it can be listened to on the Transformation Talk Radio Network. It's every first and third Wednesday at 11 to noon Pacific time. And, I like to invite guests like you. I also talk about, alternatively, about all these different topics that we are struggling with at times, whether it's about how to feel more free, how to deal with anxiety around money, how to find more happiness, how to also, of course, deal with anxiety, insecurity, things like that. So there are many different topics, and I'm always happy to also hear from the listeners what they would like to get addressed. And so every other week there is another little tool box-filled radio show that can help you to also navigate through life a little bit easier and with a greater sense of confidence.
And where can they find you and your podcast?
It's at, the easiest is to go to the fearandanxietysolution.com website. It's the fearandanxietysolution.com, and there's a radio button you can go to, or you can also find me at Transformation Talk Radio. And on the Transformation Talk Radio, I am one of the hosts.
Wonderful. Now, Friedman, what made you leave Western medicine and science and focus on fear and anxiety?
Well, there are different answers to this. One of them is certainly that Western medicine just felt in some ways limiting to me. I grew up with a mother and a father who were both kind of typical countryside doctors. And what I loved about the way they were dealing with patients was that they integrated all of what they saw about a patient's life into their approach to help them to heal. So what their family situation was, their work situation, how they were dealing with stress, what they were eating. They took time. Now, these days in medicine, there is not a lot of time. Usually you have like 10 minutes maybe with the doctor, and you can barely talk about your complaints. There is not really that in-depth knowledge of a person. And when I was in cardiology, that was a similar situation. And I noticed a lot of our patients were dealing with not only the stress of a heart attack or a stroke or things like that, they were dealing with those stressors, anxiety, beforehand. And we were really not equipped to deal with maybe the root causes of those physical issues, because now we know stress is one of the major quote-unquote killers in our society, because it does really tax the body a lot. So I shifted simply my focus after a 7-year time in research and doing basic research in molecular biology on focusing more helping people to address their mental, emotional, but also the mind-body connection, so that they have a greater sense of empowerment to heal from the inside out. And the second answer to your question would be, I had a lot of anxiety myself, and I was really, struggling, especially in my childhood and in my early 20s, that I just was searching for myself for solutions to overcome anxiety, and I think that certainly was a driving force for most of my life.
I know that most of the studies say that 70% of the doctor visits are due to stress and anxiety. Do you look at stress and anxiety as the same component, or do you have that there's a distinction between the stress and anxiety when you need to treat it as a physician?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there are different grades, and it's the same with fear and anxiety. I mean, there are different topics that these emotions get triggered by. And when it comes to stress, it can be a very focused contextual stress about, let's say, a very unpleasant colleague or boss at work, that can eventually lead then to a more generalized anxiety and get out of hand. But people that are dealing with anxiety are often more dealing with, bigger aspects of their life that they're anxious about, where they feel easily not fitting in, or they feel like just in general not good enough, or they feel like that, there is just always a shoe dropping somewhere, even if it's very unclear what that is. So that's more a generalized form of anxiety. And as I said, stress can lead to that, and anxiety often can also lead to a greater sense of feeling depressed and somewhat hopeless.
Yes, there is a lot of connection, it seems like, between anxiety and depression. Sometimes there's a depression that adds to the anxiety, and sometimes there's an underlying aspect of anxiety then that it leads to depression. And you said something that is very keen. There's different types of anxiety also, right? I mean, there's some of them which is just existential anxiety, like fear of death. That every human being at one point in life is going to have it. It's just the phase of life or what happens to us as human beings who emote and have feelings and express their emotions based on a life situation. And then there are the biochemical, root causes of anxiety, or going from one phase to another phase, or social anxieties. Can you talk a little bit about the distinctions that you have found in your research and you've put it in your book?
Well, you're absolutely right. There is a very contextual anxiety that doesn't necessarily take over. Let's say, for example, you're dealing with a health issue, or a loved one is dealing with a challenge, and there is an anxiety that is really focusing on that. And I believe anxiety is a very natural emotion, and we shouldn't suppress it or get rid of it, because we would really take out one of the emotional aspects of our array of feelings, and I think we would be kind of a little bit emptier because of it. People love to get anxious in horror movies. They're still, the best sellers in the box office. So it's not like anxiety is totally unpleasant in that regard, and it's certainly not unnecessary in many ways. But when anxiety takes over, when anxiety becomes kind of your identity, your foundation, when you really do feel that you wake up with that just underlying feeling of stress, fight, flight, freeze, that is when it's really time to do something about it. For example, I feel a lot of people have a continuous anxiety, especially these days, because there are maybe greater expectations, there's higher pressure, there are financial concerns. You mentioned young people. I think there is also more peer pressure. There is social media that creates anxiety. And that anxiety is often just taken for granted. It's like, well, this is how it is. This is how we are living. We are living on a high-speed world, and our emotions are also accordingly high speed. But then they notice eventually, well, maybe I cannot sleep very well. Or they notice that, well, maybe my body starts to ache and have pains. Or they notice that they are going into unhealthy self-medication, and that is actually derailing them. So I think part of the issue is that we are not necessarily identifying when anxiety becomes a problem or when anxiety should be addressed until it is really a big problem. So my suggestion is always, when you do feel a continuous sense of stress, anxiety that seems to occupy your mind and your emotional state, just look out for help. Don't wait until you became, addicted to some medication or drugs or alcohol, or until you feel like your body is breaking down or you have insomnia. Just address it earlier and do something about it.
I have found also with many of the clients and myself as just a human being that many of the thought process that we were raised with or took on from life and kind of concluded in our system that it becomes part of the way that we keep triggering anxiety for ourselves. And I know in your book, you also talk about the subconscious world, which could also be the root cause. And in your book, it says, well, how our subconscious scares us. How do you think our subconscious scares us?
Well, the subconscious is a big part of our emotional landscape. I mean, many of our emotions don't really make consciously rational sense. We would love to control our mind and our emotions this way that we would say, well, every day I want to wake up looking great, feeling great, being ready to go for the day and have a blast, and at the end just feel totally satisfied. Wouldn't that be wonderful? But that's not the case. We wake up, we feel like, oh, I look terrible, I have no energy, I'm worried, I'm scared, I don't even know why. And that is that subconscious maybe, reflection on something that we were not even consciously aware of. I mean, many studies showed that the subconscious takes in information much more quickly than the conscious mind. And so there may have been something going on before, the day before, or you may have a fleeting thought that just pops up and creates anxiety, and it comes so fast from a deeper part of your mind that you haven't even noticed it. But lo and behold, your emotional system reacts to it. You are in that stress response. So the subconscious, when you look at it just from that aspect, of course there is the brain aspect, there is a biochemical aspect, there is a genetic aspect. All this is interesting and certainly also has a lot of validity, but it's not very empowering. I mean, I don't think that taking medication is, not a solution. I feel it's something that can help a lot of people to just get out of the spiral of anxiety, but it doesn't necessarily change the way you think or believe. It is a stepping stone. It's a beginning, but I think when we have anxiety, it's very helpful, like you mentioned before, to do some form of therapy to really get to the root of it. So I like to look at it just more from that, what does the subconscious do? And the subconscious is something that is developing faster and earlier than the conscious mind. So a lot of what we have been dealing with in regards to our anxiety is already anchored and rooted early in our lives. And the easiest example is the beliefs. When we have been growing up in an environment that just didn't feel very stable and supportive, and it created a sense of anxiety inside of us. The subconscious comes up with, well, how do we deal with it? What is our survival pattern here? What do we need to do to just make it through? And so it may come up with the idea, well, let's just, become invisible, avoid, let's not just stand out, because we always become the targets of those in power. Or maybe another subconscious mind would say, well, let's make sure that you're going to be the peacemaker, which was my case, or the one that always is pleasing everyone, and then that becomes a pattern. Those behavioral patterns and those emotional patterns will continue to run your life. You will, no matter how safe your life became, no matter how successful you became, there will be always an aspect inside of you that will, kind of gravitate towards that invisibility or that avoidance or that pleasing. There are other patterns in that. And that is rooted in the belief of not being safe or not being fundamentally acceptable or not really belonging. And those beliefs are, you could say, like filters through which you look at the world, and any kind of judgment, rejection, criticism will be overinterpreted and will scare you because you don't have that mindset, that filter that says, well, that's projection, that's just, what other people are thinking, I know myself better, that hasn't developed yet. And so helping people to identify those beliefs and then replace them with beliefs that are much more accurate and up to date to who they became is one of the ways to really address those subconscious root causes of fear and anxiety.
So looking at the beliefs as you were growing up, we also have the aspect of what you just said, not feeling safe. And most children who have had some kind of trauma or have lived in an environment that anxiety was there because of life situation, whether the parents created it or the environment or the society created it, that the level of, how to handle the unknown was there, and maybe, it created the unsafety for them in a sense. So as you said, and people grow up in believing and honoring the unsafety versus really looking at the strengths that they've created while they grew up. So sometimes they go into a learned helplessness where, because as a child they couldn't, they think that even as a grown-up they can't. And then life, as we grow up, there is a lot of unknown. There are a lot of things that we can't control. So it becomes, it's like the anxiety becomes an innate fabric of some people's personality, because they always live in a state of, I can't handle what the next thing that life is going to bring for me, and I know that I'm going to fail at it, or I'm not going to be great at it, or I don't have enough strength at it. So the inner working of that type of anxiety and fear, and we're not talking necessarily illnesses such as, obsessive compulsive disorders or panic attacks or anxiety attacks, or anything that has a little bit more into the biochemical aspect of it. And we're just talking every single human being kind of goes through some parts of this. And your suggestion about how to overcome these types of thoughts and belief systems that again have become kind of fabric of the personality and the outlook as the filters.
Yes, I mean the filters, in this process, the fear and anxiety solution process, the belief filters are in many ways, an advanced step or one of the later steps. The first step is really to address the emotional charge that is still giving, you would say, energy or still activates that filter. So like you said, if you are growing up in a rather difficult circumstance and you go back just remembering certain situations, if you still feel triggered, if your body still has some kind of a reaction to it, chances are that you haven't really completely healed what happened to you. And so there are processes like the pattern resolution process where you do go back in time and you are able, just from a different perspective, understand and learn from and reframe and grow from those occurrences and those patterns that started from it. And the beauty about it, what I noticed, is that when people are able to address, 2, 3 traumatic events, and they can be rather traumatic. I work quite a bit with people that also went through abuse and molestation, and when they have been addressing a few of those events that they remember and that they really feel like have been triggering this anxiety reaction and have been feeding the belief of not being safe, the subconscious seems to extrapolate the learnings onto other events. It's almost like, okay, I got it. Now this is resolved. This is outgrown. And so you can actually make progress without having to address everything that ever happened to you, because there is this bigger framework that the subconscious can place around it that can say, okay, now this all falls into that same resolution, into that same way of looking at the past and looking at yourself differently. On your own, this can be a little tricky, especially if these events have been quite charging and damaging. So there is it's certainly recommended to work with someone that can help you to guide through the maze of your past and gain a different perspective. But when you are addressing then those emotional charges, that we suppress often. It's like the pressure cooker ready to explode. And if we are suppressing those charges, they don't go away. They are just somehow festering inside of us. So if we are able to resolve them on that deeper level in a very relaxed and safe, non-re-traumatizing manner, there is actually almost like a reset button that gets pushed, where you look at your past in a much more neutral way, in a much more empowered and adult way, and you don't feel so pulled back into it. And that is one of the steps that is, I believe, necessary to then also eventually address those limiting beliefs, the beliefs that in the past have been maybe just keeping you stuck and trapped.
Are you talking about my book now, Life Reset?
Yeah, it's an excellent book. I mean, I think there are great tools in that. I was really enjoying because you were on my show a few months ago,
yes.
And it's a great resource. I can definitely recommend it because it also gives you a hands-on approach, and so yeah.
You said there was a button, there was a reset button, and you could reset yourself. I'm like, I think he's talking about my book now instead of his own. But so when
I think there are different reset buttons, but they are all possible.
Definitely, yes. I know that there's even the study, as I was reading it at the beginning. I know that there is a way that we work with anxiety and calm down the anxiety. There are, different versions of not only the cognitive part, but also a physical part that helps to continuously calm down the anxiety. And then sometimes a person learns how to calm down their anxiety and obviously heal the traumatic wounds that were from the past. And as you said, if we can dismantle those traumas that have happened, then we don't automatically keep going to the same place. So we can be free from the automatic positioning that those traumas got created for us. And then there's also this other part where phase of life consideration keeps creating anxiety and fear for us. Like you're going from middle school to high school. Then you have to say goodbye to all of your friends and the structure of 12 years of being with the same people every day, and now go to the university, which has a completely a different structure and different pressure and different types of peer pressure. And then, leaving university and going into the workforce, and have come, facing being novice again at the whole new world, or finding a mate, or marrying, or having children, or having your children grow up and move on, and having to face the empty nest syndrome and who am I again, having to face saying goodbye to a career and retiring and reinventing yourself. So each part of normal life, and I'm not even talking trauma or having issues, or we're talking a successful normal life by itself has a lot of anxiety that gets created right at the cusp of moving to the next level of unknown. What are your suggestions for those types of anxieties?
Well, I have been changing my career 3 times, and I have been living in 3 different countries. And so every time you can say there was a whole new chapter that opened up. And to be honest, I have learned a lot from those radical changes. And one thing I learned is, like you said, it brings up a lot of anxiety, but it brings up a lot of anxiety because there is also a sense of re-identification that needs to happen. Let's say, for example, you have been very involved in your career, and at some point you let go of it, or you were forced out of it. You lose a big part of your identity. And the more you have been attached to that identity, the more room it has had inside of you, the more you feel lost, the more you're staring at a void and you're feeling like, oh my God, now what? Because the unknown of what is to come next or will even come anything next is too great. Now, the more you have a sense that you for lack of a better word, know yourself, the more you can identify yourself outside of your circumstances, where you're not just feeling like, well, I'm my friends, I'm my house, I'm my relationship, I'm my work, but where there is some greater understanding of yourself, where that saying, wherever you go, there you are, just comes really true, the less anxiety you have. Because the anxiety ultimately is about the fear of loss and the fear of the unknown and the change. Well, if you know you're not losing yourself, and even though your circumstances are changing, but you are not changing that radically with it, because there is something inside of you that remains very much known and something you trust in or believe in. And again, that takes sometimes work to get there. The more you can actually look forward to those changes, because you're going to look at this as, wow, that's an adventure. Going to be very curious to find out who I'm going to be when I'm going to make those changes. So for me, the move to the U.S. was very difficult. I lost myself because I was in cardiology, then I got into research. I was a very small researcher that really didn't have a lot of ideas about what he was doing. Then I went back into graduate school and got my PhD and had to build myself back up. But that was literally a time of 2 years where I was so insecure, I was so anxious, I had no idea who I was, who I belonged. Everything that was familiar I left in Germany, and that was really hard. Now, a few years ago, we moved back to Europe. And there, I had a whole different relationship to myself. And I was much more feeling like, well, I'm going to go here and I'm curious to see what's going to happen. What I discovered is that not only I love to write and do my work and work with clients just worldwide through Skype, Zoom, and so on, but I also enjoy having horses. I love being an amateur farmer and ride a tractor, things that I had no idea they would come, and they came. And so I felt I could discover more of who I am. So my advice is just learn to find yourself every day and don't get lost in the minutia and the details, and maybe even in the criticism or in the praise of others. But always try to recenter yourself in all different kinds of ways, journaling, meditating, inner contemplation, reflection, so that when life is changing outside of you, you always know where to go inside of you to find that calmness and that peace again.
We're talking to Dr. Friedmann Schaub, and I don't want to say your last name wrong. I want you to say it so I can hear it and everybody hears it.
Schaub. It's like shout with a B. I know I don't know. It's hard. I know. Most people
we all
say
have.
Schwab.
Yeah. Well, we are all come from different parts of the world with different
That's right.
languages, and our names could be hard to another person. But I hate chopping it down, and I know that I want people to hear your name as it needs to be sounded like, as it's meant to be, and that's why I wanted you to say it too. The award-winning author of Fear and Anxiety Solution, a breakthrough process for healing and empowerment with your subconscious mind. Now, one of the biggest topics that people all over the world have anxiety about is money. Obviously, it attaches itself to safety, security, identity, success. I mean, it associates with so many aspects of our life, where that is one of the most topic that everyone somehow faces at one time or another in their life. They're very, very minor, let's say, percentage of people that might never have to have an issue about it. Maybe there were trust fund babies, which they never even dealt with finances and somehow, and that never became an issue. But that is such a minute percentage of the world. I think most of the people around the world have to deal with money and finances in one way or another, and have some sort of an anxiety about it. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think it's interesting about money because it's very relative. You say trust fund babies don't have to worry about it, but having worked with quite a few people that have never to worry about money, that doesn't prevent them from being very anxious about it or being very lost, period. So if we believe that money creates a sense of peace and happiness, it's unfortunately not the case. Money cannot buy it. It can give you maybe the sense of I can afford everything, so there is a kind of freedom idea with it. But peace of mind, purpose, a sense of self-worth rarely comes with a lot of money. And in fact, I feel people that are struggling with money to make ends meet often have a greater sense of purpose because they do feel I'm actually really working hard to provide with my family. They are feeling like, this is something very old. I believe this is something that has been, maybe passed down in our DNA, but that idea of being the one who is providing, who is, gathering, hunting, working hard to be there for the loved ones, there's a deep satisfaction in that. And that satisfaction is something that I think people that never have to do that is missing in them. They do feel there is a lack of purpose. Now, when it comes to money, and I'm going to plug in quickly my YouTube channel, Dr. Friedmann Schaub, because there is a whole radio show on the fear about money, and there is a guided meditation on how to overcome the fear of money. And one of the things that I find is helpful for me about money is just to see it more as something that you actually are, let's say, the steward of. You are the gardener. You're the one who sees money more as an energy and not so much as something that's hanging out there and it's too high for you to reach. And by simply understanding that, I am the one who can also take care of my money and generate money, and maybe I will never be a millionaire, a billionaire, but whatever I am having and whatever I'm spending and whether I'm using it, that can give me a sense of empowerment and confidence. I was many times in Egypt because we used to do healing tours to Egypt, and our Egyptologist who, just was always traveling through Egypt said one of the challenges about the rural Egypt was that people who had very little were very happy, very easygoing, very content with their lives because they were present and they appreciated what they had, and they made some money, they went to the market and bought something that they usually didn't afford, and they felt proud of it, and so on. Then TVs came into these little homes and huts and satellite dishes and cell phones, and all of a sudden people were seeing, wow, look what other people have in the Western world, in America, look what it's possible. And all of a sudden that, how he said it, that wanting came into people's mind, the jealousy of others, the dissatisfaction through comparison. And that is when a lot of people started to become unhappy and feeling frustrated and feeling like, why not me? And then they go out and move away from the rural country into the city in the search of making more and ending up even more unhappy because there is nothing for them to do or work to find. And so that one thing I think we are all a little bit guilty of. It's not that money is something that is evil or bad or always in lack. It's also what we are doing to ourselves when we are having these wants of expectations, when we see this money as something we have to have more of because we have to purchase more or buy more or be more. That is when we are creating our own negative relationship with money. And it's like if you have a wonderful spouse and you're really happy And then you hear in other cultures, oh, you can have 3 or 4 spouses. And they think, why don't I have 3 or 4 spouses? And all of a sudden you feel like, well, I'm not happy with my spouse anymore because I could have 2 or 3 others. And, that is where our mind, when we are not really trying to reel it back in, can just take us out of our present and basically take us into the fictional world that we feel like, we should have or we should be a part of, but we can't, and everything that is in the now becomes irrelevant. And that's our responsibility. And I think that's something we can do about something, change it by refocusing on what is versus what we want to have.
And we'll do that more and more right now with social media. So a lot of people are waiting to see all that other people are having fun and what they have and enjoy and display. Many people don't display, their sorrows and things that they need, but they do display their better side and things that they do in the presentation. And I think we see that. And even if we see the ones who are in need, we want, obviously that's not what we want. It doesn't trigger our desires. Our desires gets triggered by something we don't have and someone else has, and it appears to be pleasurable. So if it's presented out there that somebody has it and they're enjoying it and it's pleasurable, then it triggers our desire to also have it, and then makes what we have less than and what they have better, and then the seeking of doing everything in order to gain it. And if we don't gain it, then we already assigned less than to what we already have, so then we're not happy with what we have because we already saw a glimpse of a better out there. And I totally agree with you. Then when we find ourselves and the beauty in many different realms and aspects of our life, and can sit within ourselves and redefine what joy and happiness and safety and security is, then we can also calm down our anxieties as we, instead of steering it up and creating more havoc at it, to actually calm it down. We have 1 more minute for your last thoughts to our listeners.
Oh, is it the minute for the last thoughts?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. 1 more minute. And
okay.
You got 1 minute to give us the jewel of your experience.
Well, I have to say, if you have anxiety and you are able to shift away from being afraid of your anxiety, creating secondary anxiety because it feels so unpleasant and all you want is just to get rid of it, run away from it, not having it be a part of you, but you're actually shifting into first maybe compassion for yourself, compassion for your struggles, compassion for that part of you that may feel not good enough or that may not feel safe. And then also being curious about what is actually causing the anxiety. What are my thoughts? What are those old events and traumas? What are those beliefs? What are things that I really don't understand about the anxiety, but I want to look at it more closely, like the pain in the body that tells you, well, maybe you have an appendix that is inflamed or a bone that is broken. Look at it with curiosity, openness, compassion. What will happen is not only, that's the beauty about this whole journey, not only will you feel much less anxious and you will be much more able to appreciate the anxiety in the future because there is a message to it, but you will also discover so much more about yourself. It is really getting you from your head into your heart. And that is the gift that anxiety has given me, and that is a gift that anxiety has given many of my clients. So don't be afraid of your anxiety. It can be one of your greatest teachers and inner compasses.
Please go to www.thefearandanxietysolution.com and join Dr. Friedmann Schaub at his Facebook on the Fear and Anxiety Solution page. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure.
And for everyone who's with us, it's been a pleasure being with all of you this week, and I hope that you have gained as much as I've gained from Dr. Friedmann Schaub. And go and have an amazing week and month and a year, create an amazing space for yourself, to love yourself, to know yourself, to calm yourself, and to create this peace of mind inside of you, because that kind of goes all over. If you are in a space of calmness and love, you give that automatically to everyone around you. So give a gift of yourself to yourself and everyone. Create an amazing lifetime for yourself. I'll talk to you next week. And if you can, call me back at 818-648-2140 or go to Foojan.com and connect with me. Bye-bye.
You're listening to The Inner Voice with Dr. Foojan Zeine, only on LA Talk Radio.